Wait is over. Now it is time for us to hear from our our very own chief guest, His Excellency, Mr. Mohammad Ali. Mr. Mohammad Ali needs no introduction, especially for the Memon Professional Forum and the Memon community. He is an alumni of Memon Professional Forum and a pride of our Memon community. He is a true visionary and always extended his care, concern, and support for the Memon Professional Forum. He has been part of our earlier events as well. When we discussed with him about this event, he just abruptly said, "Kab aana hai?" So, sir, here we are, and we are with you. Thank you so much for your unconditional support, sir. Mr. Mohammad Ali has been serving as the Special Assistant to the Prime Minister since August 2024 on power with the status of State Minister. Before that, he has also been sworn in as the caretaker Federal Minister for Ministry of Energy to look after matters of energy, power and petroleum. He was sworn in on August 17, 2023. He has also served as the chairman of the Securities and Exchange Commission of Pakistan. Please, with a huge round of applause, please welcome our chief guest, Mr. Mohammad Ali.
Assalamu alaikum everyone. Thank you Irfan, thank you Mohammad Ali Bhabha Saab and all the organizers of MPF for inviting me here. It's always a privilege and an honor for me to attend MPF functions. Because यहाँ पर Memon Professional Forum के काफ़ी members बैठे हैं, so I think it's pertinent to note that MPF was the one which gave me scholarship for 2 years when I was doing my BBA and MBA at IBA. Memon Professional Forum के जो आज ऑर्गेनाइजर्स हैं, जो पार्टिसिपेंट्स हैं, जो मेंबर्स हैं, पास्ट के स्पेशली जो हैं, उन सब की बदौलत ही my life changed frankly because IBA, 4 years at IBA was the event in my life which was a life-changing event. So I've not been able to contribute much time in the recent past, but there's a great organization and inshallah, I hope we all continue to do good. So thank you for having me here tonight. I would also like to thank my dear friend, and I've not done it before in a public forum, but I thought today is a pertinent time because this is the first time I think Asif and I are sharing the stage as speakers. And I would like to thank Asif because he has been a consistent support to the energy sector professionals in the country. हमने कई बार आसिफ से कहा कि आप सरकार में आएं, ज्वाइन करें, आगे आएं, but he is one of our, I would not say unsung hero, but sort of an unsung hero who has contributed a lot with a single-minded focus कि पाकिस्तान का energy sector किसी तरीके से fix हो. And when we were doing our 2019 report, one of my colleagues, Noman, is here and he knows it. Asif helped us tremendously in that. So he was a key element in our 2019 report, and since then we have had our differences in the very recent past on some issues, but otherwise he has been a great support. So thank you Asif for everything you have done. So आज की जो talk है, although topic is power sector reforms, challenges and opportunities, but I've split it into 2 parts. The first part is the IPP's renegotiation that we are doing, and other speakers have not touched upon it because I'm the one who is actively involved in that. So that's the first part. And the second part, I'll talk about the power sector challenges, reforms and opportunities. So let's begin with the IPP's renegotiation because this is something which has been the topic, burning topic recently, which has been on minds of a lot of people, especially businesses and professionals. And I will touch upon the historical background and factual details and my views. And I'll try to be brief in this because I know we are already slightly late. इस टॉपिक के ऊपर because I'm involved in this, I was involved in this in the past, तो मुझे खुद को भी अक्सर I struggle with lots of questions because there are questions related to ethics, morality, right and wrong in this. And sometimes there's no right and wrong. Things are a bit nuanced, but we need to think a bit deeply and we need to find answers. और answers में थोड़ा time लगता है. So I have been, because I've been living with this for the last few months, and I thought before coming here, how do I put it forward? So I think there are two different questions to ask here. First question is renegotiation of contracts a recommended option? That's one question. And the second question is renegotiation of contracts acceptable in certain situations? And they're two very different questions. And the answer to these two questions is where the crux of the debate and the differences of opinions lies. The first question is renegotiation of existing contracts a recommended option? No, it never is. I believe most of us, if not all, agree on this answer. It is never a good thing for country or any participant, any party to open contracts. But the problem and the answer lies, and the difference of opinion lies in the second question, which is renegotiation of contracts acceptable in certain situations or not? That is what we need to answer. उसमें हम सबके अलग-अलग जवाब होगा. कोई हाँ कहेगा, कोई ना कहेगा. But frankly, globally, individuals, businesses, and countries face situations where one party believes there are reasons which make it acceptable to relook at the contracts. The other party in those situations will probably not agree with this, but one party believes that. And it is this situation in Pakistan which has been faced as far as IPPs are concerned. Now we have to remember that IPPs are a utility which sell electricity to the government of Pakistan under a single buyer model. Now it is unfortunate, but the reality is that we have not been able to move away from a single buyer model to a competitive market where market forces determine the supply and the prices. IPPs are a regulated business which are required to make reasonable return under a regulated regime, and they cannot be making returns based on the market demand and supply functions. It's a regulated business. If IPPs are set up at a higher than actual cost, if their expenses are inflated, and if they are paid more than their actual expenses and the agreed profits, then who bears the brunt of that extra cost? It's the consumers who will bear that extra charge. In reality, the wealth gets transferred from consumers to the owners of IPPs. Any transfer of this wealth or payment beyond the agreed return is questionable. And in case this happens, then a natural question to ask is, if the renegotiation of contracts acceptable or not? The question which I asked earlier. Or should we continue to live with the contract and continue to pay payments which are more than envisaged by the policymakers when the contracts were initially signed? Now one can say that we've signed the contract, no matter what happens, let's continue to live with this. But at times, it is just not possible. And that's what Pakistan was and is facing. Here it is also important to highlight, unlike the impression given in certain quarters of media and conversations, that Pakistan probably keeps engaging in acts which hurt the investment climate. There's a perception. But at the time when IPPs were making huge amounts of profits, there were other sectors also which were making huge amounts of profits. Some examples are banks, fertilizer companies, E&P, some of the food companies, some pharma companies. Now, despite the fact that banking is a licensed activity and a regulated activity, despite the fact that fertilizer and E&P sectors are linked with the government through gas supply or sale contracts, no renegotiation has taken place. Because their profits may be high, but there is no element of what was agreed initially in the contracts and what actually happened. There is no element of either a misreporting, a misrepresentation, or a wrongdoing. Now, these are all questionable, and people will have different views, but there's no suspicion of any wrongdoing. So the impression that Pakistan keeps renegotiating, I think that needs to be dispelled. a lot of us know that banks have made a lot of money by lending to the government. But I don't think we have gone and said, okay, let's renegotiate their profit margins. Yes, government has imposed taxes, that's a different story, but contracts or terms have not been renegotiated. So that's one thing I want to highlight, that we need to dispel this impression. It is the IPPs that we keep going back to again and again. And then there is a history to this issue. In 2012, it just happened that I was the chairman of SECP, and we looked at the profits of IPPs, and we found them to be making profit which are higher than agreed. And we ordered an inquiry, but the inquiry was stayed by the courts. In 2017-18, NEPRA tried to do the same, and that was also stayed by the courts. So we are all humans. So if things are being looked into by the regulators and they're stayed by the courts, anybody would say why? Why aren't the regulators being allowed to look into these things? Payments of fuel and O&M, as per the financial records, are higher than what was spent. And there have been instances, and we have seen those, and I can't name those, that some renewable plants were set up at the same time, same technology, with massive differences in their capital cost. So there is a suspicion of over-invoicing. It's unfortunate that we have not, that it's very difficult to go to the money trail, and it is very time-consuming activity. We have not done that. But in a regime where consumers are responsible to pay the debt, to pay the interest, for all expenses, spare parts, insurance, if there's any payment over and above the return which was agreed in US dollar terms, then the contracts become questionable. And it is these acts which have led to the government's decision of re-looking into the contracts of IPPs. Now, globally, what happens in other countries? Is Pakistan different? Now, in developing countries, there have been instances of renegotiation. However, in developed jurisdictions where the judicial system is strong, the regulators and government institutions are diligent in regulating these entities as well as utilities. And they ensure that incidences of misrepresentation and wrongdoings are either avoided, or if those entities indulge in any wrongdoing, then penalties are imposed. It is the job of the institutions to look after these matters. But unfortunately, in our country, our institutions failed to perform their duties diligently, and temporary committees and task forces have to be set up to do the work which was the responsibility of the institutions. So it is very unfortunate the way we have to handle these situations, the way we had to renegotiate in 2021, the way we have to renegotiate now. I wish the institution would have done their job. Because they failed, and because that's where the problem lies, we have to come and do it, and frankly, it does hurt the image of the country. So this is not right, and this needs to be fixed. So among all the issues that we are discussing today, I think one of the big issues is the capacity of our institutions. Asif and Ruhail and Amit touched upon good governance. Yes, that's a big issue in the country, and we need to talk about it. So I've just shared some facts, some background of the IPP's renegotiation, and I leave it to you to make up your minds. Obviously, my speech was a bit one-sided, but you can make up your own minds. Now we go to the second part of the topic, which is the main topic. What is wrong with our power sector? Now, if we go down to listing the issues, the list will be very long. And frankly, a lot of it is already touched upon by Monas and Amir and Ruhail and Asif. So I would not go into the details of those. I might briefly touch upon this, but I'll try to go towards what are the bigger issues and how to solve it from a macro level. And I think we need to go to the root causes of these issues. Whatever issue, I mean, not being able to fix the net metering regime is a problem, but there's a cause behind it. Not being able to sell discos, excess supply, transmission constraints, these are the problems. But what are the causes of these problems? Why do we end up with these problems? We might solve these problems over the next 6 months or a year, I mean, these are not very, very difficult problems to solve. 80% of these. Now, the competitive market might take time, the distribution, का जो long-term concession agreement या privatization, that might take time. But some of these problems in the next 1 or 2 years can be solved. Most of these can be solved. Net metering and transmission constraints. But we need to address the root causes. Because unless we discuss those, unless we address those, the problem will not go away on a permanent basis. Now, I would like to highlight 3 issues, which in my opinion are the root causes. 3 issues. And then I'll talk about 3 solutions. First, the big issue is government's footprint in the energy sector. And that has been touched upon. Within the power sector, except KE, our entire distribution and transmission is in the government hands. Around 50% of our generation is with the government. And if you look beyond the power sector and the petroleum sector, a large part of our exploration and production, a large part of our oil marketing through PSO, and our entire gas transmission and distribution is controlled and managed by the government. Now we need to ask, what is the responsibility and what is the role of the government, and what is not the responsibility and role of the government? Running businesses should not be the government's role. And neither is the government equipped or trained to run businesses efficiently. If the government footprint was not that high, there would have been no circular debt in Pakistan. There would not, it is just not possible, because private sector would have borne those losses and the government was not responsible to continue to pay interest and a lot of other things, the distribution losses that we talked about, the recovery losses that we talked about. So government footprint is huge. We need to introduce competitive power markets and affordable wheeling charges on an urgent basis. And these will be the real reforms which will reduce the government footprint in the generation sector. Similarly, as already talked about, we need to privatize DISCOs, and maybe, and I have been a proponent of this, that we should think about privatizing NTDC. And frankly, that idea came from Asif, that why do we have NTDC in the government sector? I thought about it and I read upon it, and some countries have already sold the transmission system. So we need to think about it, because NTDC doesn't have the capacity to plan and to install the infrastructure which is needed to transmit electricity. So one big issue, government footprint. The second big issue faced by the power sector is our inability to plan properly. That has been a huge issue. We are not good planners. And this lack of good planning is linked very, very closely with the first issue, which is the government footprint. Lack of effective planning is primarily due to absence of market forces in the decision-making process, and which has led to our government officers being responsible to make decisions related to demand and supply, decisions related to fuel mix, investment, location of our energy assets, pricing. Everything is decided by the government functionaries. Unless we have the market forces determine these, we will continue to face the problem that we are facing. And frankly, a large number of these decisions have gone wrong. In past, we have seen periods of excess supply, and when we have excess supply of electricity, we stop adding new supply, and then we end up with a period of excess demand. And these periods of excess supply and excess demand are playing a huge role in the price mismatch and the price distortions that we are facing today. So, the planning function, because right now government footprint is large and it will not reduce overnight. But the planning function needs to be improved. Who are the people responsible for making IGCEP? Have you ever taken a stock of the past IGCEPs? How were the tariffs decided? Why were they decided like that? How these tariffs were calculated? What was the rationale behind this? So the planning function overall needs to be looked into. The third issue, besides the government footprint and planning, that the power sector and frankly a number of our sectors are facing is lack of accountability for the decisions being taken. There's a massive lack of, there's no accountability. Decisions can go wrong. The decisions that we are taking today or we'll take tomorrow In 5 years or 10 years, people might say with hindsight that some of those decisions were wrong, and that's part of life. But there have been decisions taken or not taken in the past which frankly fall either in the domain of incompetence or in the domain of vested interest. And both need to be looked at, incompetence and vested interest. Now, decisions like excess supply that we are facing today. I think Asif showed the slide that out of 40,000 megawatt, the peak demand in winter is like 10,000 megawatt. So 30,000 is excess supply in winters. Transmission constraints. We all knew, the institutions in the country knew in the last 10 years that excess supply is coming in the south, cheap supply is coming in the south, and demand is in the north. Why wasn't investment made in transmission? Who was responsible? Excessive dollar-based returns, excess payments in the past under various heads. Now, these have been decisions which have been adequately highlighted in the media over the last 5 to 10 years, adequately highlighted. But no accountability has taken place. Not a single official, not a single decision maker, be it in the regulatory body, be it in any other institution, has been taken to task. Forgetting the accountability, there is not even a report made to learn from these, how to avoid these. So, accountability is missing, and that's one of the issues that we need to resolve. So, at a very broad level, if we fix these three issues, I think government's footprint needs to be reduced, the planning function needs to be improved, and accountability has to be brought in the system. I think a lot of our problems at a lower level will start getting answered gradually. Now, the next natural question to ask is, what needs to be done to fix these three big issues and avoid them in the future? So the three solutions in my mind which I would like to discuss, and although they're very simple solutions and we all talk about it, but I think this is what we need to fix in the country, and if we focus on these three, our issues will automatically keep getting resolved. But before that, we need to remember that the energy sector globally is going through massive transformation. And besides fixing our existing problems, we will also need to keep pace with the changing world and the new technologies. Now, I'm highlighting this point because this aspect, this change, this transformation, this reality is important in the solution that I'll talk about. And if we want to address our issues in a holistic manner, we will need to focus on few areas, and which should be the area that if we focus on those few areas, then automatically other problems will get answered. And the three areas are people, structure, and decision-making processes. If we fix our people, if we fix our structuring, and if we have the right decision-making processes, I think everything will fall into place over a period of time. As far as the people are concerned, we need to start with the right blend of people at the highest level in the country. And the highest level is the ministry. NEPRA, CPPA, PPIB, they're all NTDC, DISCOs, they're all institutions. But who decides the board of directors in these institutions? Who decides the members? Who decides the CEOs? Ministry has a huge role to play in this. So we need to get a blend of civil servants and professionals in the ministries, because neither civil servants alone nor technical experts alone will be able to solve our problems. We need both. These two sets of people are trained differently, and decisions of the future will require input and input from and discussion between these two sets of people. Unless we get the right blend of civil servants and professionals in the ministry with the right expertise, we will not be able to solve a problem. And this is where we need to start. We need to start somewhere. If we get the right, we are doing, in the task force, we are, in the last 5 months, I think we have achieved quite a lot. And a big reason for that, a huge reason for that, is the analysis cell that we have created. We created on day one, we took people from NEPRA, from CPPA, from SECP. These are the people who had worked with us in the past. We put together a team of 8 people from our government institutions. But they had to gel together as one team. And they were the right people with different skill sets. And that team is the one which is the brain of this task force that we are doing. So if we have the right people in the ministry, automatically things will start falling into place. Now, besides people, the second reform we need is at the structure level. And Asif has covered it in detail, so I'll very briefly touch upon this. And the world has moved away from separating power from oil and gas. Energy matters irrespective of the source of energy. And in the world of the future, most equipment will be electrified. And the source of electrification can be oil or gas or nuclear or water or anything. Now, we will need a structure where all elements related to energy are housed under one ministry. Now, we have one Ministry of Energy with 2 divisions, but it has to be one, under one leadership. Because the decisions related to power are affected by the decisions in petroleum and vice versa. Besides structuring the ministry rightly, we also need to structure the regulator rightly. We need, as Asif talked about it, we need one regulator, one energy sector regulator, because the decision taken about the power pricing, the tariff affects the pricing of gas, is impacted by the price of oil, etc., etc. So we need one energy ministry and one energy regulator. Now the structuring also goes beyond the ministry and the regulator. For example, NTDC, which is a transmission company. Should we have one transmission company throughout the country? 10 discos. That's the structure. Do we need 10 discos or we need 5 or need 20? What should be the ideal size? Now we have one disco in Quetta, Kesko in Balochistan, huge geographical coverage, less dense, and we have one disco in say Lahore. So what's the rationale? Under what logic are they created? We need to question these things. CPPA, now we're creating ISMO, which will look after the comparative market. Is the structuring right? So the entire ecosystem of the power sector needs to be looked at in terms of structure. Should they be function-based structure within different entities? Should they be any other way? These need to be questioned, because unless the structure is right, we will not be able to get the right people. If you do not have a legal department in an entity, you will not have a lawyer. If you don't have an economics or finance department, you will not have an energy economist. So the people and the structure are linked and they need to be fixed. Now the third change that we need is our decision-making process. We need to question the decision-making processes which were involved in some of the major decisions that we have taken in the past. Now, frankly, if our decision-making process was correct, we wouldn't have ended up with the problem we are facing today. So there's something wrong somewhere. We have excess RLNG, which we are trying to defer some of the cargoes, but we have load shedding. Industry is asking for LNG, the captive debate that is happening, but we are saying we will not give you LNG. We will disconnect you. Can we disconnect them overnight? No. Some of them do not have the connection. Some of them need reliable grid. And I believe the reliable grid is possible. I don't agree with that argument from the industry. But these decisions have to follow a certain process. How are the decisions taken? And who are taking the decisions? Are they based on data? Are they based on discussions? Or are they based on very, very brief conversations? So the decision-making processes need to be looked at. And frankly, these decision-making processes can only be fixed if we have the right people and the right structure. So this solution is dependent on the first two which I talked about. So I know that there are a number of issues, and they have been talked about by the speakers, and most of you, I'm sure, have read about them. But if you want to fix these, we will need to start somewhere. And if we go down to solving at a tactical level, we will solve 3 problems, 2 more will crop up. So if you get the right people, if you have the right structure, and if you have the right process in place, automatically over a period of time, things will fall into place and things will start getting better. Somebody has to analyze and look at every problem, and automatically the solutions will keep coming up because the expertise and the knowledge and the analysis and the intellect is already there in the system. We just need to use it. So ladies and gentlemen, it's true that our energy sector is facing problems of affordability, accessibility, and sustainability. The 3 objectives, which are the objectives of our energy ministry and probably most ministries around the world. And there are various issues, and issues are complex. However, if we have the resolve to solve them, it will not take more than 2 to 3 years to solve significant majority of these problems. And unless we solve these problems and unless we provide affordable energy to all segments of our society, our progress will be hindered and the quality of lives of Pakistanis will not improve. So this is a real problem, but it's a solvable problem. It just needs the right people, the right resolve, and some time to fix it. Thank you very much.